Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you might be joining us from today. Thank you very much for taking the time. This session won't be too long today. I won't take too much of your time. Just so I know that you can hear me and just to check if we do have anybody joining so far, if you could just perhaps send a quick message on the chat bar, maybe say hello and just let me know where you're joining from, just so I have a sort of an idea of who we have here, that would be great. And then we'll get into things. So I'm not seeing any messages just yet. I don't know if that's because there's nobody here or if because people aren't logged into YouTube, or if you just don't want to let me know where you're from. Either way, that's fine. This session will be available after anyway, so I'll continue with things. So today we're going to be talking about FPP annual plans and how they can help you sort of save money, stretch your budget further, and reach more of the world really than has ever been possible before. So firstly, I'd like to begin with just a very brief history of FPP and what we've been doing sort of with virtual events. So we first moved into the virtual space in 2012. We worked with an external company to hire a platform and host an event. Um, it was before my time with the company, but I understand there were a few issues and things. But because we really believed in virtual and the different advantages it can bring to both students and recruiters, we decided to take a step back and then look at building our own platform. And so we began that process in 2015. And then at the start of 2017, the platform was ready and we launched it. And so for 2017, 18, and 19, we were holding around about a dozen or so virtual events. So not a huge amount. It was really sort of just an additional recruitment service we were offering. And then in 2020, when I guess the world was turned upside down, that's when our virtual platform was really put under, a lot of strain. And we started to hold, well, that year in 2020, we held 60 events. And then 2021 last year, I believe it was around about 115 events. And so that included our own virtual fairs, our own high school sessions, and counsellor workshops, our networking events. And then we also held a good number of private events for external, either universities or governments, so we can host open days and recruitment events and the such. And so for next year, we have, I think, just about as many events coming up, and we hope to sort of reach as many countries around the world, if not more, this time. And so, again, this is a slide taken of a presentation we've done recently. As you may or may not know, here at FPP, we've decided to go fully virtual, really from the start of 2021 onwards. Even when the world goes back to normal and travel is possible, events are possible, we're going to be focusing fully on our virtual events. And so, why is this? We believe there are just so many advantages to the virtual space and virtual recruitment that we really want to focus on these to help you recruiters, you marketeers, and also to help the students and the parents as well. So just a few points to mention. Meetings today, as we've sort of all learned over the last 2 years, can be carried out perfectly effectively online. Everybody's now really very comfortable, I think, with meeting either through Zoom, through Google, through Meets. There's so many platforms that I think everybody has sort of found something that works for them. And then, of course, we're now reaching that younger generation of student who were really born, I suppose, maybe not born with the iPhone, but by the time they were old enough to hold one, all kids were growing up with iPhones. So they're fully comfortable with technology. So it just makes sense that they're going to be more comfortable working or meeting universities in a digital space. And they no longer need to head to a convention center to meet someone face to face. They can have an online video call perfectly fine. Virtual events are, of course, more sustainable. You don't need to take a taxi, then flights, or connecting flights and more taxis to reach the country you're visiting. You don't need to ship your materials. So there's far less emissions and waste. So it's far more environmentally friendly. We say no bounds. By this, we mean there really is no boundaries to where you can reach. In previous years or with in-person recruitment, you might decide to visit Brazil, for example. If you go on a tour of Brazil, maybe you'll reach 6 or 7 cities throughout the course of a fortnight. Whereas with a single virtual event, even if it's just focusing on Brazil, I don't know how many cities, towns, and villages there are in Brazil, but with a virtual event, you can reach far more than 6 or 7. They're of course more cost effective. Again, this is partly because you're not spending your marketing budget on flights and shipping materials and on your hotels and meals, and all of the your budget is going towards the actual event. And then with saving time, of course, you're not then spending weeks on the road to visit maybe 6 events. You can attend one event to reach as many cities and countless more. And also in that time, you can do many other virtual events to reach almost again countless cities and countries around the world. And then with better follow-up, by this we mean with the technology that's involved, and we'll be sort of introducing some of our new tools in the coming weeks. But you have the opportunity to sort of have more data on students. It's far more easy to follow up after the events. As well for the student as well, they're able to save the materials to their backpack, their virtual backpack as we call it, so they can sort of check it out at any time. They have your contact details, so it's very easy to sort of stay in touch, either with the university or the student, depending which side you're from. And so again, in 2021, as I mentioned, we held around about 115 events. And in these events, we reached 170 countries around the world, which I think would be completely impossible with in-person recruitment. And from these countries, we reached over 10,000 cities, towns, and villages. Again, impossible throughout. I don't know how many years it would take to visit all of these. And then we welcomed 195,700 visitors to our events. The next point there, where it mentions we planted 5,149 trees. Here at FPP, we're trying to be, we're not quite there yet, but we're well on our way to becoming sort of carbon neutral. And so although our events, we're no longer flying, we're not shipping materials and such, they're still, we're still having to power our computers and power the servers. So there's still a little bit of carbon emission. We're working towards offsetting that. And so we've made a commitment to plant a booth. Not to plant a booth, to plant a tree for every single virtual booth we host at our events. And so last year alone, we planted 5,149 trees. And I believe in total, over the last few years, when we've been holding virtual events, we've now planted over 9,000 trees. And that's going to continue to grow. And it's something that we're very excited about. And so looking at next year, we currently have 69 virtual events scheduled around the world. This includes our virtual fairs, our high school sessions, and our council workshops. And then on top of this, we'll also be hosting a good number of independent events, so university open houses and recruitment fairs and the such. And so here I'm moving on to our annual plans, which is what the session is focusing on. We launched these, I believe, in June or so last year. And as you can see, we have 4 options. The idea with an annual plan is it's just to make your life easier in terms of how you book and how you pay, and then also to give you more for your money as well, which is really the key thing. So as I said, we have 4 options, beginning with the starter plan, which includes 15 virtual events, all the way through to what we call the top recruiter plan, where we have 50 events included, as well as the additional extras, which I'll cover in a moment. And so really the key points of the annual plans is that your budget can be spread much further. So we have the 2 different prices for, the 2 figures for each plan. We have the full price for the plan. So for the starter, it's $19,500 for the calendar year, or for the 12 months after your first event, I should say. And I can explain that in a moment. All the way through to the top recruiter plan, which is $42,000 for the year. But as you can see, that takes the cost per event to just $840. And so you can see there, that's quite a dramatic saving compared with our normal event pricing, which with a virtual affair starts at around about $1,890 US. So you're saving around about $1,000 for each virtual fair. Our events do change in pricing depending on the type they are. So we have our high school sessions and counselor workshops are generally a little bit cheaper than our virtual fairs. But overall, especially when you look to the intermediate and advanced and top recruiter plans, you're saving quite a good amount per event. And so essentially that just means that your budget can be spread much further. You can attend more events than you'd normally be able to. And then we've also included the additional extras. It's also important to note that we do only have 100 plans available. And this is because we do have capacity at events. If we sold or if we filled, hundreds and hundreds of plans, then we'd really struggle to, fit in all the different live sessions and webinars around the year. And some of the events, we would not be able to accept all of the plan holders because, again, we do have capacity. And so at this point, we now have 32 plans remaining. And so here we're moving on to just what else is included with the plans. So of course, the number of events is quite self-explanatory. The way the plans work is essentially you can sign up for a plan and then it will last 12 months from the day of your first event. So for example, say you register for a plan in January, but your first event doesn't take place until 15th of February. You then have until the 15th of February the following year to use up all the events that you've registered for. You also don't need to register for all the events at the time of selecting the plan. You can maybe select 2 or 3 to begin with and then add more in the coming weeks. And as you sort of build your plan, you can just select the events that match what you're looking for. We're quite flexible as well with when we can accept your registration. As long as, again, we still have space at the event if capacity hasn't been reached. Otherwise, you'll be able to register up until fairly close before the event because we'll be able to import your booth from a previous fair. Some of the plans will include a social media campaign, and here our team will be able to work with you to reach the type of audience you're looking for in the countries you're looking for. Our team of who works on the social media side of things has actually been growing over the last couple of years, which has been really nice to see. Because of course, with COVID, so many companies and organizations around the world have had to maybe reduce their workforce. We've been lucky enough to bring on a handful of new members, which has been really nice to see. Then we have the event sponsorship option. And so with this, we have several different tiers of sponsorship, but with the annual plan sponsorship, the one that's included, you get your logo and link is on the email registration that's sent to all students. And as well, your logo appears in the event lobby with a link to your booth. And that really does dramatically increase the number of students that visit your booth throughout the fair. Then we include live sessions and webinars. I'll quickly explain the difference between these. So live sessions are hosted across our social media platforms. So similar to what we're doing today, they're hosted on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Although not on the FPP channels, they're on our student-facing side of things, which is called the Student World. And that's actually, as some of you will likely know, that's the name of all of our events, and is how students know us. So the live sessions are hosted live on our social media channels, and it's to a global audience. We'll promote the session, and you'll be joined from students from sort of all around the world, wherever they may be. And then the difference with the formats between a live session and a webinar is a live session is maybe a little more informal. We've sort of set it up with a host from FPP or the Student World who will sort of have a very informal chat with a number, well, 1, 2, or 3 of your institution's representatives, just to sort of make the students feel like they're watching almost like a chat show. It's a very relaxed environment and students can sort of send questions throughout. And then with a webinar, this is sort of your tailored session. So it's a more traditional online presentation. You choose your target audience, the country you're looking for, you share with us the presentation, and we'll reach your students for you. And then the final point is perhaps something that may not be of use to everybody, but we're seeing more and more inquiries about this option. And that's hosting your own event on our virtual platform, whether this be an open day or something else. We offer various discounts to hosting your own event. So moving on again, this is a slide I've taken from another recent presentation we did, and I just wanted to quickly compare the costs of an in-person recruitment tour compared with virtual events. And so here, what we have on the left is the cost of our events from the tour of Brazil we held in 2020, which was actually unfortunately cancelled halfway through because of COVID. But this is, the pricing and the dates we had. And so if you were to attend all 6 cities, with the free event you get from our multi-event discounts, it would have cost you just over $13,000 for 6 events. And then we've worked out sort of the cost of flights and extras. We did check on, flight comparison websites and things like this to get rough estimates, but these are, I think, very conservative prices. So, we've marked at the bottom right, $16,000 to $20,000, but depending on, I guess, where you're flying from, perhaps a flight from, I don't know, say Sydney to Sao Paulo may be far more expensive than New York to Sao Paulo, for example. So it can obviously vary. So 16 to 20,000 was a very sort of conservative estimate. And with this, you would attend sort of 6 events over the course of a fortnight. Whereas if we compare that with one of our annual plans, for example, we have here in the middle, if you spend $22,000, which is, I believe, the intermediate plan, you receive 20 events. And then, of course, it does depend, it varies from exhibitor to exhibitor, depending on the type of institution you are. Some schools will maybe generate fewer leads if they're a little bit more niche, whereas some, maybe, for example, big US state universities would generate a lot of leads if they have, over 200 courses, for example. So, but that would be true whether it's a virtual or physical event. So we've sort of estimated 100 events, 100 leads per event for a virtual fair, which again is very conservative in general. We've seen many universities collecting many more leads than that for each event. But it shows the difference in cost per lead you're spending, and then also the amount of event time you're actually getting for that investment. So with a physical fair tour, the tour we held in Brazil, you'd get about 42 hours of event time, and that does include the event setting up. With an in-person event, it does definitely take a little bit longer to build your booth, put up your banners, and then undo it all at the end. With a virtual fair, perhaps the first event might take a little bit longer if you've not done one with FPP before, just because you have to build your booth. But then once you've built the booth once, you can then import it into each event after that, and of course make any changes as and when needed. And then, so that's 82 hours compared with 42 hours. And again, with the physical events, you're actually spending about 13 days away from the office, whereas with the virtual fairs, they can be done either at the office or at home, I suppose, depending on the time of day the fair is being held. And then really one of the big comparisons is the number of cities you can reach. So with the physical fairs, we said 6 cities. I suppose you can have students maybe coming from towns just outside the key cities where the events are being held, but it's still only going to be maybe around a dozen or so. Whereas with a virtual fair, even if it's a fair in Brazil, it's just going to be reaching hundreds and hundreds of cities. But if you're attending 20 events, you can, spread these around the world. So you're reaching really thousands and thousands of cities. And then finally, what's the difference, physical versus virtual? We've just got really a very brief sort of comparison on the amount of time you're investing, which, as you can see, it's far more investment in terms of time for the physical events compared with virtual, for around about the same amount of dollars. And then the reach for virtual is just, I wasn't sure if I did this calculation correctly because it seems like a huge amount, but the reach from, 6 cities to 10,000 cities is quite extraordinary. And then the final thing to mention, as I mentioned before, is recruitment is now sustainable. This is becoming increasingly important, I know, to both a lot of universities and to students. I believe there was actually a survey done by the PI fairly recently, where students that were surveyed were saying that sustainability and sort of environmental factors were actually more important to them than location where they went on to study. So that's definitely a new trend and is something that's becoming more and more important to students. And so you can see there the image of the boxes. That was actually taken from one of our events. I'm not sure which one. I suspect perhaps one of our large ones, maybe Bogota. But that was quite typical. We'd receive what looks like hundreds and hundreds of boxes there filled with brochures, many of which I suppose probably wouldn't have even left the convention center in the end, because it was always better to have more than not enough brochures. Of course, with virtual events, that's no longer needed. All your brochures are uploaded online. Students can download them to view as and when they want. And so, because as I mentioned before, we're now planting trees for each booth, we've sort of essentially gone from asking you to send brochures to the events. We're now just going to be planting a tree essentially for each time you do attend an event with us. And so that's it for today. As I mentioned, it would be quite a relatively short session. If there's any questions at all, and come back to the stream, I'm seeing a few messages here. So we have the first question I'm seeing here is from Lee, who says, "Are people really attending virtual fairs? Most virtual events we've done have super low attendance domestically anyway." So Lee, I'm not sure which institution you're from. If you've done any FPP events, we don't do domestic events. All of our events are international. So I'm going to assume that maybe you're a US university. So we have many US universities or colleges attending our events, whether it be Mexico, Latin America, Brazil, India, Southeast Asia. The attendance numbers do vary from event to event, as they would do with in-person from a US state university, perfect. But yes, this number of students does vary from event to event, but generally we do have very good attendance. It's difficult to answer, but yes, for sure I can say that people are absolutely attending virtual events. Actually, we had our first event of the semester this week, sorry. We held our Indian Subcontinent Virtual Fair. I think we had around about 50, 55, I think it was, universities from around the world. And so it was to students throughout India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Bangladesh. And we had just over 3,000 visitors for that single event. So yeah, absolutely, people are still attending virtual fairs. What I would mention as well is with our virtual fairs, they're quite broad. So they're open for students looking for undergraduate, postgraduate, or language. Then we do offer more focused virtual events, which can be either just postgraduate focused. We're doing our first STEM event, which will be taking place, I believe, in June. We also have an MBA event. And then we have the high school sessions. These generally do have a lower attendance, but that's because they're purely focused on undergraduate recruitment. And they also differ from our virtual fairs because rather than promoting online through various social media channels, we have a team of high school event coordinators, and they work directly with selected high schools, a mixture of international, private, high-level public schools, to encourage their students to attend. And so the attendance at those events is smaller, but the general quality of the student is very, very good because they're from the schools where the students can go on to then study abroad. So then Lee's asking again, do we have an idea of what sort of carrot has been notable offer at virtual affairs that attract international students? So what we try to do is focus on the universities and the different exhibitors that are actually attending the events. We try not to focus really on scholarships. We know that there are scholarships available, and that's great. But what we really don't want is an event full of students who are only there going from booth to booth, looking for sort of any scholarship that they can find. So yeah, we do really try to focus on different institutions we have, if they have any sort of unique or interesting programs and things like this. And then yes, if we have any sort of providers that are joining the events as well, then yes, we'll include them in the promotion as well. But again, we try to focus on the fact that it's a study abroad fair, and so we focus on the different exhibitors that students are able to meet. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Are there any other questions at all? So if you don't have any other questions at all, or if you'd like to maybe send them by email, unfortunately I didn't include the email address here. Perhaps Vincent can pop it up on the screen. But if you do want to learn about our events at all, you can just send an inquiry to us. Either just head to our website and we have a contact us page, or you can use the talkto@fpp.world email address. And then one of our team will be able to sort of help with any questions you might have. Yeah, that's it there on the screen now. So I hope this was helpful. And yeah, thank you very much for joining. And we'll be hosting our next session, I believe, in around about 3 weeks or so. So stay tuned, and we'll be sending out a couple of emails to let you know what we have coming up in that regard.